So, I, like most people, occasionally crawl through the lower bowels of Netflix, and, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of shit down there. Netflix only shits out about 2 good shows a year, and the rest is trash. But Netflix recently decided to bless me with one of those good shows. If I were religious, I'd thank God, but my atheism doesn't allow me to. Blue Eye Samurai was created by Michael Green and his wife Amber Nuizumi. Yes, I mispronounced that. You don't have to comment. Now, you've never heard of Amber, but you might have heard of Michael Green before. He's written some great things, some alright things, and some terrible things. Safe to say, Michael Green's got a pretty decent track record. Now, as far as I can tell, Amber has never worked on any shows or movies before, and if she has, it's probably only small projects that neither you nor I have ever heard of. But I didn't know anything about this show before watching it. I didn't even know that it was created by the same guy who wrote Logan. I somehow hadn't even seen any marketing for it. I hadn't even heard of it. All I saw was the name Blue Eye Samurai in the Netflix spotlight, a guy with some cool-ass sunglasses, and a guy with demon mask talking about how the other guy murdered an entire dojo. And I said, yeah, that looks cool. So I watched it. And cool it was, because Blue Eye Samurai is probably one of the best things I've seen in the last couple months. Though it doesn't exactly have much competition, well, except for Across the Spider-Verse, but that one is a literal masterpiece. In my opinion. There's good action, good writing, it's very entertaining, and god damn it do I like it. But of course you have absolutely no context for anything. You want me to actually get to the review, because you're interested now. At least I'm assuming you're interested. That or you're annoyed that I haven't gone to the meat of the video yet, so, well, fuck. Guess I gotta get to it then. Now, before we really get into it, first I'll give you a little spoiler-free review in case you want to watch it yourself, which I would suggest you do. Set in 17th century Japan after it had closed itself off from all foreigners, we follow Mizu, a samurai.
I never said I was a samurai.
Alrighty then. We follow Mizu, a not samurai who's on a quest for revenge against the 4 white men who were present in Japan at the time of her birth. One of these white men did the non-consensual horizontal horror with Mizu's mom, and that's why Mizu exists. Because of this, Mizu is ostracized by pretty much everyone. She's literally seen as a demon, so to hide her blue eyes, she wears these cool-ass Django-style sunglasses. Along her quest, she gains an accidental companion, an accidental rival, and she ends up accidentally uncovering a plot to overthrow the Shogun of Japan. And to Mizu, all of that takes a backseat to her revenge quest. And that's about as far as I can go without spoiling anything. The performances are pretty good across the board, though Maya Erskine and Kenneth Branagh, again, no idea if I pronounced either of those names correctly, are the standouts. Maya does a really good job with Mizu. She manages to be fucking terrifying and badass, but she also does a good job when Mizu's vulnerable. And I can't exactly explain why Kenneth Branagh's performance is so damn good without spoiling the plot, but let's just say he's fucking amazing, and we'll leave it at that for now. And the rest of the cast is also good. They give, good performances, but nothing that quite matches the standouts. The dialogue is also well written, for the most part.
Your whore mother cuts your hook because your father is a white devil. Just jump.
Well, buddy, with dialogue like that, I think I just might. But outside that, most of the dialogue is pretty good. It's also animated pretty well. I don't think it's at the level of something like Arcane, but it's still good. Like Arcane, it's a mix of 3D and 2D. The backgrounds are mostly 2D with 3D characters that blend in pretty well. There's some seriously great visuals as well, but sometimes the animation is a little awkward. It feels a little floaty in some scenes, and there's also a couple oddities here and there. For example, in this scene, the writing on Mizu's skin is pretty obviously low res. I can literally see the pixels. But things like this are pretty rare, so it's not too big of an issue. Oh yeah, there's also lots of dicks, tits, and viscera. But okay, let's be real, you're still here. You want to get to the spoilers, because you don't care about the spoilers. So, let's just get into it. The opening scene sets the tone pretty well. Mizu shows up at a noodle shop looking for some info. She's of course not the only customers, there's others, including the flesh trader Hachi. Hachi is a dick. The son of the shop owner, Ringo, accidentally spills some noodles on Hachi cause, you know, he doesn't have hands. And Hachi whips out a nice little pistol, a western pistol. And Mizu wants to know which white man sold it to him. Hachi, though, is a dick, so he tries to kill Mizu, and Mizu then takes his fingers. But she does leave him alive after he lets slip who sold the gun to him.
Heiji Shindo!
And with that, Mizu leaves. Ringo is inspired by Mizu's strength and decides to leave his simple life to try and become Mizu's apprentice. I think that this scene is a very good introduction to both of these characters and the show overall. We immediately understand that Mizu isn't exactly a good person. Sure, she takes Hachi's fingers, but she leaves him alive, and she leaves the girls with him that he was gonna sell to a brothel, and he's still gonna sell them to the nearest brothel against their will. She doesn't care what happens to them, she got what she wanted, and she moves on to the next target. And that's gonna be a running theme throughout the rest of the season. The white man that Mizu is searching for is Abijah Fowler, and he's being protected by Heiji Shindo, a black market merchant. And together, they make the shogun a lot of money, which is the only reason why Fowler is tolerated. After all, legally speaking, he's technically not allowed to be in the country. Of course, he isn't allowed to just wander the countryside. He's kept in a castle, on an island, and never allowed to leave. But the two of them have been cooking up a little plan to take over the country. You see, no foreign trade also means no foreign inventions, like guns. And Fowler is pretty much the only trade link between Japan and the West, so he's the only one who has access to guns. Can you see where I'm going with this? Their plan is pretty simple. Just kill everyone with guns. Of course, Mizu doesn't know about any of this, and even when she finds out about their plan, she doesn't really care. She just wants Fowler dead. But of course, there's other characters besides Mizu. There's also Princess Akemi, the daughter of a major lord, and she's set to marry the undefeated swordsman Teigen. Of course, this is feudal Japan. The daughter of a lord can't just marry the son of a poor fisherman.
I'd marry you if you were the son of a poor fish.
She does manage to convince her father to go along with it. Unfortunately, Teigen just so happens to be the best fighter at the Shindo dojo. And if you'll just quickly use your brain, you'll probably be able to figure out that the Shindo dojo is in some way related to Heiji Shindo. The dojo is actually run by his brother, and so Mizu shows up, beats the fuck out of everyone there, and turns the undefeated Teigen into the very defeated Teigen. Because of this, Akemi's dad doesn't allow them to marry, and Teigen goes off in search for Mizu to kill her and win back his honor. And Akemi then goes off in search of Teigen. Akemi's subplot isn't particularly original. She's a woman living in a sexist society, so to gain agency and power, she has to learn to manipulate the men around her. It's a story you've seen before, but I think it's still written pretty well. Akemi is strong, sure, but she's not physically strong. She's not a warrior like Mizu. She can't just solve all her problems by stabbing the shit out of it. She thinks that if she can just find Teigen, everything will just go back to normal, which of course it wouldn't. Because even if she finds him and convinces him to go back with her, things would still be fucked. Teigen would still be disgraced, and Akemi would still be forced to marry the shogun's son. She's eventually found by her dad's goons and forced to marry the shogun's son anyways, and she understandably sees her marriage as a bit of a prison. But Madame Kaji, the proprietor of a brothel that both Akemi and Mizu defended in episode 5, points out that Akemi has opportunities that most women, even noble women, could only dream of. She may not be able to hold direct power, but she's still the wife of the Shogun's second son. She can still hold power through him. Again, I've seen most of this before, but it's still well written. Akemi's arc is pretty interesting. She's, sure, strong, but she's not flawless. She's somewhat naive at first, and perhaps just a little bit entitled.
Fucking brat.
She doesn't want to confront her issues, so at first she runs from them, before eventually realizing that she won't solve anything that way. It's a simple, not very original arc, but you know, it works. But Teigen, that's where we get something a little more interesting. Teigen, at the start, is the undefeated champion of the Shindo dojo, so he's just a tiny tad bit arrogant. Oh yeah, and he's also this kid. Yeah, so Teigen was from the same town as Mizu growing up. And Teigen was a bit of a dick. And he's still a dick when him and Mizu meet again. But then he gets his ass beat, and worse yet, he gets his ass beat by somebody who he considers to be less than human. So then he goes off to win back his honor, because while Teigen is a dick, he's an honorable dick. When Teigen finds Mizu, she's just gone done fucking up a bunch of guys sent to kill her, but she's also pretty fucked up herself, and passes the fuck out. Teigen could easily kill her, but he chooses to let her live. Or at least let her live long enough for her wounds to heal so they can have an honorable duel. He's basically got two good qualities. He genuinely loves Akemi, and he's got honor. Even when he gets bonked and kidnapped by Heiji and Fowler and tortured, he still refuses to tell them where Mizu went. Not that he really knows where Mizu went, but he could have saved himself by telling them either a bullshit story or just telling them that he doesn't know shit. Eventually though, Teigen realizes that he'll just end up like Mizu if he continues down this path. So he gives up on revenge and tries to reunite with Akemi. Unfortunately for him, Akemi's gone in the opposite direction. She doesn't want a simple life anymore. She wants to keep her power, so she sticks with her new life and her new husband, which I gotta admit was a pretty surprising twist. I like it, you know, I like Teigen's arc, I like that Mizu acts like a mirror to Teigen, showing what he could become if he continued with his revenge quest, and I like that he still loses despite the fact that he realizes his mistakes. But then there's Ringo. Ringo, honestly, is my least favorite character. He's not a bad character, but compared to the rest, he's just the least interesting. Ringo is your classic, compassionate, goofy counter to the serious and dark main character. But I just wasn't very engaged by his character, and he kinda annoyed me at first. I will admit, he kinda grew on me as the season went on, but he's still my least favorite. But enough about the good guys, what about the bad guys? Well, there's a couple small villains here and there. There's Hachi, Boss Hamata, and the Four Fangs. But they only last one episode and none of them are very interesting. But they don't have to be, after all, they're minor side villains. It's the main villains that I want to talk about. Heiji Shindo is pretty simple. He's a businessman. His business just happens to be crime. He's a straightforward character. Why does he want to overthrow the Shogun? Business. Why does he work with Fowler? Business. After all, Fowler provides goods that no one else can. But that's not to say that he's totally rational. Heiji is clearly somewhat sadistic. He very much enjoys torturing Teigen, for example. He's not as hedonistic as Fowler, but he does certainly have some questionable tastes when it comes to entertainment. He also secretly hates Fowler. He doesn't seem to just see Fowler as a liability, he seems to just legitimately hate him. It's not really about business, because later he even threatens his own plans just to fuck over Fowler. In episode 3, he even meets with Mizu where he offers to help her get close to Fowler so she can kill him. Of course, Mizu rejects this offer, maybe because she doesn't trust Heiji, or maybe she simply doesn't want to share her revenge, maybe both. But Heiji loses an arm because of it. But the real star of the show is Fowler. Fowler is the second best fucking character in the entire show, and he's definitely the most entertaining. Fowler is unambiguously evil, and he knows how evil he is. Everything he does because he likes doing it. He doesn't care about any greater agenda, all that matters to him is whether he enjoys it. He doesn't really care about the Japanese, he doesn't care about the English, he doesn't care about some greater English agenda, because he doesn't have a greater English agenda, because he doesn't seem to really care that much about his home country. Which may also somewhat tie into the little bit of backstory that we're given, but we'll get there. The only reason he seemingly wants to take over Japan is because he wants to be able to do whatever he wants, go wherever he likes, without having to hide. I think that there's one scene which perfectly sums up Fowler's character, and that's this scene in episode 4, where Fowler tries to make a deal with God. For some context, Teigen has been kidnapped at this point, and Heiji and Fowler are torturing him for information, but they're not getting much out of him.
I'm bored.
So he just says fuck it and fucks off. And so, on his way back to wherever he wants to drink his wine, he walks by the chapel, which he never asked them to make, by the way.
They just assumed the white man required a chapel.
And it's not like Fowler doesn't believe, because he does. But he just doesn't care about God. But he is still a businessman, so he proposes a deal to good old J-Man. If he helps Fowler take Japan, then Fowler will turn it into a good Christian country. Not because he cares, but just to fulfill his end of the deal. I love this scene because it perfectly portrays the fact that Fowler knows that he's a bastard, but he doesn't care, because he likes what he does. Now, they do give him some backstory. You see, during the 9 Years' War in Ireland, no, I won't explain it, Google it, Fowler was just a child. Famine hit, his parents died, and eventually his sister also died. So he buried her, and ate her kidneys. And after that, he vowed that he'd never do anything out of necessity ever again. It's not much, but it's enough to humanize him. He's a bastard, but he's not so cartoonishly pure evil that it's impossible to take him seriously. He's written in a way where, yeah, I can totally imagine someone like that existing. Simply put, Fowler is a fucking fantastic character, and I loved every scene he was in. And a lot of it is thanks to Kenneth Branagh's performance. Fucking give this man an Oscar, because he makes this character one of the most entertaining I've seen in quite a while. Now, I've been praising this show for like the last 15 minutes, so you might think that there's no issues, but you're intelligent, so of course you know that there's gotta be at least some issues. And there are. I've already talked about some of the problems with the animation and the dialogue, so I won't repeat them.
Your whore mother.
Shut up! Something that I noticed around episode 6 is that Mizu is fucking indestructible. In episode 5, she gets stabbed, strangled, nearly fucking crushed by a door, and the next episode she's just fine. And sure, we can assume that there's probably at least a couple days between episodes, maybe even a week or two. But these types of injuries should still affect her after even a couple weeks. This is the type of shit that takes ages to heal. Another thing that I noticed is that Mizu absolutely should have died numerous times in episode 6. Now, there's things I'm very willing to overlook, like Mizu surviving this fall into the water. Yes, you totally die IRL, but there are so many movies and shows and games that ignore how physics works with water that I really don't care about stuff like this. But I can only take so many scenes where a character absolutely should have died before I start getting annoyed. She gets stabbed, fights off entire armies of armored men, and survives 2 separate explosions. The first explosion I can excuse, as she is shielded from the explosion by the monkeys, but she should have died with the second one. There's nothing shielding her. The wall is completely blown out, and even if somehow Mizu could survive, Teigen definitely should have died. Does this man look blast-proof? Is he wearing blast protection 4 diamond armor under that robe? That being said, episode 6 also has some of the best visuals. There's some interesting and surreal imagery, all thanks to drugs of course, but even outside that there's some really cool visuals. I think that this episode also has some of the best music. Most of the music is traditional Japanese music, at least I think it is. I'm not exactly a music expert, and especially not an expert on traditional Japanese music. But there are also some rock tracks sprinkled throughout the show, and I like how that contrasts. In this episode in particular, there are a lot of those contrasting tracks. Oh, and lastly, the last episode did feel a bit unsatisfying, and I think that's mainly just because Mizu's arc kinda concludes in the previous episode. It's not a big deal though, and it didn't ruin the episode for me. It was still a very good episode, just felt a little bit unsatisfying. Now, enough of the negative shit. I want to talk about my favorite episode now. That being the tale of the Ronin and the Bride. So, a little bit of context. In episode 4, Mizu visits Madame Kaji's brothel, because it's the only brothel that serves Fowler at his castle. But Madame Kaji is unwilling to tell Mizu how to get into Fowler's castle unless Mizu does something for her. You see, Madame Kaji adopted a deaf girl once, who had been abused by her father. Kaji tried to be good to her, tried to be kind, but the local boss, Hamata, decided that the girl would be a good fit to be his wife. And by wife, I mean his personal whore. So, Mizu thinks that Kaji wants her to kill Hamada, but Kaji instead wants Mizu to kill the girl, because Kaji doesn't want to take the risk of Hamada surviving and killing everyone in the brothel, which is also why she asked Mizu to make it look like an accident. So, Mizu kills the girl, but when she sneaks out the building, she's spotted by a kid. She lets the kid live, but the kid tells Hamada, so Hamada shows up the next day to murder literally everyone with his army. And that's where episode 4 leaves off. Episode 5 is all about Mizu trying to defend the brothel, but it opens with a puppet show, the titular tale of the Ronin and the Bride. If you're smelling symbolism, then you'd be right. But who's this bride? Well, it's a little complicated. You see, throughout the episode, Mizu flashes back to her time being married, because yes, Mizu was married at one point. You see, Mizu initially didn't get very far with her murder quest because she was literally stabbed pretty much immediately by the first guy she tried to question. But she just so happened to run into her mother, who Mizu thought had died in a house fire. It's a little convenient, but whatever, I'll allow it. Mizu's mom is a whore, but Mizu would rather not see her mom be a whore, and she just happens to have a little bit of money. But the money eventually runs out, and so her mom says, well, why don't you marry someone? Which Mizu initially doesn't really want to do, but a little bit of manipulation later, and Mizu's now married to Mikio, an outcast, disgraced samurai who now raises horses in an attempt to get back in his lord's good graces. At first, they aren't exactly what you'd call a loving couple, probably because of the whole, arranged marriage thing. Mikio seems like a tough, harsh asshole, but he quickly shows that he does have a softer side, and they slowly grow on each other as the episode goes on, until they fuck, after which Mizu tells Mikio about her revenge quest and her past.
I want to see all of you.
So the next day they spar a little bit, but things get a little bit out of hand when Mizu takes it too far, which Mikio doesn't really like.
You are a monster.
And when Mizu comes back home, her mother tells her that Mikio took the horses, including Mizu's horse. So she tries to smooth things over, she puts on her wedding dress again, puts on some makeup, and when she hears the hoofbeats of horses in the distance, she thinks that Mikio has come back. But he hasn't. Instead, it's a couple of soldiers sent to kill her. Someone tattled about her, and now somebody wants her dead. And when Mikio shows up, he leaves her to die. Mizu, though, is still a badass and murders every single soldier. And when Mikio shows back up, Mizu thinks that he told the soldiers, but Mikio says that it was her mother. After all, she had been buying opium despite the fact that they don't have money for it. Mizu's mom obviously denies this, and she says that it must have been Mikio. So they fight, and Mizu almost leaves them to it until Mikio kills her mom, at which point Mizu gives him one last parting gift. And all of this is intercut with Mizu trying to defend the brothel in the present, and the puppet show, which, in case you haven't noticed yet, is symbolism. And I love that it makes us look at Mizu's revenge from a new perspective. You see, at the start of the show we think that she's obviously doing this to avenge her mother, but in reality, she's doing this for herself. She wants revenge on the white men for what they made her, for the fact that they made her an outcast, for the fact that they made her a demon. Honestly, Mizu is a damn good main character. First off, she's a badass, which is always a benefit. 2, she's actually well written. At first, she's kind of a bitch, she's not evil, but she's so focused on her revenge that she doesn't really care about anyone else. But she's not unlikable either, which is good, because otherwise the show would get very annoying very quickly. Now, I don't think you're a complete idiot, you kinda know where this arc is going. At the start, Mizu is filled with hate, not unreasonably so, but as the show goes on, she begins to let go of that hate. But what I like is that she doesn't give up on her revenge. By the end, she still very much wants those white men dead. The only reason that she doesn't kill Fowler, she doesn't kill Fowler by the way, is because he knows where the other 2 white men are. London. The answer is London. They could have just gone with the cliche revenge bad route, but they didn't. And yes, that's probably also because they want that sweet, sweet second season, but still. And her backstory is also great. I like the little twist in the 5th episode that Mizu initially failed with her revenge quest, settled down, and then picked her quest back up when her marriage got fucked. Metaphorically speaking, that is. The literal fucking happened before the marriage crumbled. Simply put, I like Mizu. I think she's interesting, and I think that her arc is pretty good. So I'm recording this like 3 days after all the other audio because for some ungodly reason, the audio got fucked up for this final section, so woo-wee. Anyways, so what did I think of Blue Eye Samurai? Well, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Is it perfect? Well, no, obviously not. I don't think it's quite great, but it's good. It's worth a watch, I'd say. The animation's pretty good. The fights are pretty entertaining. And I'd say that most of the characters are at least interesting enough to keep me engaged. Again, is it, like, at the level of something like Arcane? Well, no, but frankly, my expectations weren't exactly that high. I was just hoping for something good, and I'd say that I got it. So yeah, basically, that was the video. I still don't know how to end videos properly. Subscribe. My videos aren't exactly what I'd say, consistent, but I try to get at least one out every month. That's a problem. I really should fix that. But anyways, subscribe, like, comment. I have other videos to work on because, good God, am I horribly, terribly behind on schedule. Cue the fancy outro.